Well, I use a few stories in my presentation. Because I ask them, the survivors, I ask them all the same question. Where were you at? What were you doing early Sunday morning, April 29th, 1945, which was a clear, cool day. No rain. It only rained when we were there for the anniversary.
Of course.
In fact, I was invited again to go earlier this year, but decided not to go because I'd already agreed to go on this trip to Normandy.
Mhm.
And the arrangements, the schedule that they sent me just didn't sound that interesting.
And you know,
Nowhere
this trip to Normandy is so important. It was the 80th anniversary. And it's not to say that going to Dachau and going to that reunion wasn't, but this is such an amazing journey that you went on this year.
Yeah, and this time the Dachau anniversary, although they told me they would pay for myself and a companion round trip airfare, hotel, meals, whatever, all be taken care of. But it was only going to be 4 days total, and to go all that distance, and they were uh, two of the events were at two of the sub camps, which were no longer in existence,
Mhm.
but they were going to have two events at two different sub camps, uh, just to have a speaker there, and the speaker, a veteran from California, in the 45th Division, he was going to be a speaker there at Allach, Allach, which was the nearest subcamp to Dachau. I had exchanged a lot of emails with him, and he sent me some of his articles that were in various newspapers about his experience. And one of my emails to him, I told him that I appreciated him making personal appearances and talking, having articles printed about his experience, but I had no use for his articles or his remarks for the most part because he referred, he was in the 45th Division, but he referred to me and in the articles that the German camp, SS training camp next door to the prisoner camp, is it was all one big concentration camp. He didn't distinguish between the two different camps. And I objected to that. And I certainly didn't want to go and listen to him relate the stories that I was already familiar with.
Right.
But he sent me the articles. In fact, he it sent me several emails at the anniversary earlier this year, want to know if I was going to be there.
Mm.
I just gave him a simple response, no, period, end of sentence. And that's it.
How many altogether did your unit, were you a part of with your unit helping to liberate?
Just Dachau.
Just Dachau.
Most of the prisoners, or a good part of the prisoners that were at Buchenwald,
No,
they
what is that?
Buchenwald,
Hmm.
Buchenwald, pronounced Buchenwald.
Hmm.
They that was a lot of them were transported from Auschwitz because when the Russians were getting close to Auschwitz, they loaded a lot of Jewish prisoners in railroad boxcars and transported them to Buchenwald, which was in an American sector. They did, Germans did a number of things to try and, before the Russians arrived at Auschwitz and Birkenau, they did a number of things to try and hide some of what they did.
I imagine so.
They got rid of a number of prisoners, especially Jewish prisoners, from Auschwitz and Birkenau to Buchenwald. And they did things like that.
Now,
There were other things that the German headquarters issued orders to some of the commanders of the various camps to do. And they wanted to destroy all the prisoners, this, that, and the other, but the commanders wouldn't do that. Some of them said no, because then that would put them in danger and guilty of war crimes.
Right.
So why do that?
Right.
So I remember there was one story that I read about a trainload of survivors, and the railroad bridge a few miles ahead of the train had been bombed out, but they gave the conductor, the engineers in the train, the locomotive, they gave orders to keep going. And the engineers knew that train trestle was bombed out. They weren't going to follow those orders.
Right.
But they wanted the headquarters wanted the train to keep going and plunge into the river, so everybody on the train would be killed. All the prisoners would be killed. So of course they stopped the train, and they just didn't care where the prisoners got out. And I've seen pictures of they allowed the boxcars to be opened, and all the prisoners could escape, and they did.
Wow.
And a lot of them were women and children. I've seen pictures of the women and children running up the hillside away from that train.
Wow. This was after the liberation, or was it this was just them escaping before the liberation?
Well, I can't tell you the exact date and time because I don't know.
Right.
But they were being transported, maybe from one camp to another.
Wow. You know, you shared so many different things. Do you have that shell casing near you that we were showing in the last one?
We can try that again.
Okay. So let me lead into this, that you have a lot of pictures and memorabilia, and you're showing us the picture of your this shell casing that is from World War I. Could you please tell us about it?
Yes. This shell casing happened to be in a bombed out area in combat, and there was a lot of rubble, and of course it had been raining and whatnot. And I stumbled on something, and I looked down to see what caused me to stumble. And this shell casing, part of it was out, covered with mud, but I reached down, I recognized it as a shell casing, the part that I could see. So I pulled it out, took it with me, and I was able to clean it off and realized it was an artillery shell casing. And just so happened that my mother had received as a wedding present a solid brass lamp table made somewhere in Europe. And I realized this shell casing could be used as a flower vase. And I thought it'd be great to have it next to that or on top of that solid lamp table. So I packaged it up after the war. I cleaned it up, packaged it up, and shipped it home to my mother as a gift. So when my wife and I got married, my mother gave it to my wife and said, "This really belongs to you."
Mm.
Well, we kept it. And it was the only thing what I brought home from the war that I kept.
Wow.
And
You
one
can
year,
put it down if you want.
my grandson called me and said his teacher told him that in school they were going to start studying World War II. So he told the teacher that his grandfather lived nearby in the area and he was in combat in World War II. So I got a call, would I come and speak to the classmates? So I agreed to it. And my grandson, knowing that, he said, "You got to take that shell casing and show it to the kids."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I said, "Well, all I know is what I just told you." So I looked on the bottom. I realized it was from the First World War. It was a French 75 millimeter howitzer.
Wow.
So I went on Google and I typed in French 75 millimeter howitzer. And the story came up, said they call these things trench warfare, trench art, trench art, because in the First World War, it was trench warfare. And it said during quiet periods, some of the trenches had artisans, soldiers that were artisans, they had crude tools. So they would take these empty shell casings and put different objects on them with their tools. So this one, if you can see it, looks
Yes.
like a original woman. And then as I turn it around, it has a couple of birds. And then below that, it has a couple of roses. And in between, there's two initials, BA. Well, when I got married, the female that I married, of course, when I found this, I didn't know if I would make it home safely or if I'd ever get married. Had no idea. But the beautiful lady that I married, her name is Betty Ann. Her initials are BA. And
Wow.
the initials on this shell casing, which was meant for me to find.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's my story.
That's awesome. And I've got a couple of pictures. You were talking about the howitzer. Here's a picture of you with the howitzer.
Right. Yeah, I was a gunner on a 105 millimeter howitzer.
Eh,
And
That's what it looks like.
yep, in this case, uh, I was holding the lanyard after I'd set all the instruments properly for the fire. Then I was holding the lanyard, which was like a rope. And as soon as either the sergeant or the corporal hollered fire, then I would yank that lanyard to fire the howitzer.
Mm.
We
Now,
were in direct
go
of the
ahead.
222nd Infantry Company.
Yes, you guys supported the 222nd Infantry
Right.
Division. Yes. And I have a couple of pictures of when you played football.
Yep, that was in the Austrian Alps, and that wasn't my picture. That's one of my teammates. I
Oh,
have other pictures of me. I was uniform number 73. So if you can
so
see 73, no, I'm down to the right.
let's see. 73.
73. in that group picture. It'd be down to the right, lower right. If you could find it, no big deal.
I see 71.
73. Well, got to raise it up a little bit. Now turn to the right a little bit more.
On this,
Move it to the left. I'm sorry.
oh, move it to the left.
Yeah, move it to your right. Your right.
Okay. You're on this side?
Well, I don't see me.
No?
I know I'm in there because I have that same picture.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought both of those pictures had to do with you.
Uh-uh.
Those were the pictures that I saw. No,
Well,
but that was a fun time. I know this one's a picture of you.
yeah, that's a picture of me coming home on a Liberty ship, uh, turning home.
And you
And
guys were so excited because you came into the New York Harbor, so you got to see the Statue of Liberty coming home.
believe me, we were all on deck at the knowing we were going to see the Statue of Liberty, and we all were just saluting, hollering once we saw the Statue of Liberty again.
That must have been an amazing feeling. And
Yeah.
here's one more.
No, that's my twin brother Howard
Oh,
in Paris after the war.
Now,
That's
oh, go ahead.
that's because that was another story where after the war they gave different soldiers furlough trips. They had built a recreation area, not built it, but they took over some luxury hotels in the French Riviera as a rest area. And then, so myself, my twin brother Howard, and another soldier from Chicago, the three of us were given a trip to spend 3 days in Paris and 4 days in London. And Howard and I were unbelievably excited because we knew on my father's side, my father had a sister and a brother and their family. So we had an aunt, uncle, and a number of cousins living in London that we had seen pictures of after the war, but we had never met them. And here we were going to end up in London for 4 days to get acquainted with aunt, uncle, and cousins. Well, 2 or 3 days before the trip, they canceled me out. So Howard and Paul Wanger from Chicago went on the trip without me.
Oh,
And that picture you showed was my brother Howard in Paris on one of the monuments in Paris. Yeah, that's it. That's him on that trip.
oh.
It's one of the fountain monuments. So anyhow, I found out that a second lieutenant in the division canceled me out because he wanted to go on that trip. So they gave me a consolation prize to spend 5 days at the rest area in the French Riviera in one of the luxury hotels. Well, I was so upset. I took that voucher and I found that second lieutenant and I told him that I understood he was the one that canceled me out on the trip to Paris and London. And I told him why I wanted to go to meet relatives in London.
Mm-hmm.
And and I told him, I handed him the certificate and I said, this is a nice rest area in the French Riviera. So I want to give it to you. And if you're not interested, you could place it where the sun don't shine.
Yes.
So
Man, that's That's awful because your family was there. It wasn't just taking a trip to France. You're gonna meet some of your family there.
Well, as it turned out, so he busted me from PFC to private.
That's okay.
My About 2 weeks later, he promoted me again back to PFC. Knew all the details, but
That's crazy.
some years after the war, I think it was in the early 1960s, or maybe a little earlier. We went, myself, twin brother, older brother, his wife, my wife, my sister-in-law. We all went on a trip to London to meet these relatives, and we did. We went there and we met the relatives, and then after that, we had the aunt. We were able to get her to Jacksonville, Florida, where we were living. And so she came to Atlanta, to Jacksonville. And then a few years later, the first cousin, a female first cousin, after we moved to Atlanta, we brought her and a second cousin, both of them on different trips. We brought them to Atlanta several times.
Mm.
In other words, we continued having some relationship with the cousins. And of course, especially the first cousin, her story during the war, because I was interested, what did they do during the war? What was their experience? And her particular story was that she worked as a secretary for some charity in London when the war broke out. So she was assigned by the British government that every time the air raid, she lived in a government apartment building, and she was single, never married. So every time the air raid siren would sound, her duty was to go with her typewriter and paper into the underground where they would be safe from the air raid.
Mm-hmm.
And any citizens in there who had a son, husband, father, uncle, aunt, whatever, involved in the British military, they would dictate letters to her. She would type the letters and then mail them to their loved one. And that was her job.
Wow.
Quite often. So she said because of that, the British government gave her a monthly stipend. But by the time she visited us in Atlanta, she said due to inflation, it was worth about 50 cents a month.
Wow. Wow. And I can tell you from experience, and you probably know too, because of all the editing and stuff you've done, it takes a while to type, and that's a lot of time. But she did it for a great cause.
Yeah, so that was her story.
That's awesome. I have one more picture, and we're almost done with our interview, but I saw this picture, and I don't know what this is.
Okay. The best I can describe it.
It looks like the entrance to the Dachau in the back.
No, okay, that building in the background, that was next to the Your House building, which shows the gate. That was a two-story building called the Your House, Jourhaus, which housed SS offices and contained the entrance gate to the prisoner camp which had the famous German words, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free. This picture that you showed me was a much larger building next door, and that building was destroyed by the Bavarian government after the war. They allowed the Your House to remain to this day because it had that entrance gate to the prisoner camp. Now, the picture that you showed with that large gate, and it was much larger because it allowed that gate, vehicles could go through.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, that was a much larger building next door. Actually, that doesn't, that I don't think that shows the gate because it was that building had a much larger gate
Than that.
and it had a German swastika above the gate.
Mm.
But that was a much larger building.
I was just curious about that. I wasn't sure what that was. But it was in the group of pictures that you had sent. And I'm sorry about that one not being that football player, not being you. I don't know, like, was that you?
I'm trying to figure what that looks like.
You were in the snow.
Yeah. Well, we had snow in Badgestan, but that may not have been taken at Badgestan because the Army issued us, when we got to Badgestan, the football team, they gave us really nice heavy jackets that were lined with sheepskin. They were sheepskin jackets lined with the wool of the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
The jackets were sheepskin, not regular Army issue, but somehow they supplied us with those jackets.
Right.
So
Right. They kept you very warm. I'm glad that they had that for you guys, because that was one thing that I think about is how cold it gets there. And I think about that with honestly with just anyone, because I lived up north where it's cold, but it's much colder in Europe. And I'm so glad that your jackets kept you guys warm during that time.
I have one picture, apparently I didn't send it to you, of me wearing that jacket outside the hotel. But those were the jackets that we normally wore when we were outside.
And they gave you during the commemorative anniversary, 80th anniversary at Normandy, they gave you another jacket, which you were wearing in that picture.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, those we were allowed to take home. I have them. And those were police line jackets.
And I could
Yeah.
see your rainbow division.
Yeah, they were specially made for each veteran with their, division patch on it, their name, what unit they served in the division, and so forth.
I love it. They took a lot of time and care making those jackets and making them unique to the unique individuals that you guys are.
Right.
That was I'm glad that they took so much time thinking about how to commemorate and honor you guys. And, you've had quite a military career and you're still doing so many wonderful things by sharing your experience in so many ways to so many people. Was there anything I left out that you would like to add to this interview?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground past interviews.
We sure have.
So one thing I can maybe quote that when the National Geographic, the TV program, I was interviewed for that. And when they called me and said, you made the cut, which meant I was actually going to appear on the program, which I did. And when they did a video interview here in Atlanta at the World War II Roundtable luncheon meeting, which I was instrumental in getting them, talking them into coming here. And they asked me the same question. At the end of that interview, or close to it, anything you want to add? And I said, yes. I hope and pray that the offspring of all those who hear my voice will outlive the offspring of the deniers, that the Holocaust never existed.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they closed the TV program, with that statement.
I love it. I love it. So very important. It's so very important. And that connects with the last question that I have for you. And I always ask all veterans this: what are some words of wisdom or life advice that you would like to pass down to future generations that will see this interview?
Well, the last remarks would be, freedom is not free, period. And whoever comes after me, and doing while I'm still around, we have to be constantly vigilant to remember freedom is not free. This country is the greatest country in the world. And you look back on history, especially all the European countries, how many wars they fought over hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
That was one thing that stood out in my memory. While we saw a lot of churches in different areas of France, when we went into Germany, it seemed like churches were everywhere. Usually before we arrived at the next village, town, small city, the first thing we would see would be a church steeple.
I love it.
Telling us we were approaching the next village or town. And when I experienced that a number of times in Germany, more so than France, I kept asking myself, how could a country, knowing history that I learned in school, how could a country like Germany have so many churches and yet be involved in so many wars over hundreds of years? It just didn't, I couldn't comprehend.
Right.
Putting it together, it just didn't make sense to me.
Right. No. But I mean, that is a part of the way life is, that, that's in part spiritual warfare. It's, you're going to have God there in everything that we have, and everything that surrounds us. But then us as people, we mess things up and we make wrong choices, and it creates problems. But that's interesting to me, that for every place that you went into, you would see the church first, and that had brought a sense of peace to you as you would enter those places.
When the right people or the wrong people get in power, they want something that somebody else has.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to biblical days, the first wars was over water rights, because one group of people, one tribe, didn't have the next tribe nearby had more water resources. So boom, they wanted to take some of those, get some of those water resources. So they had a war, and that continued on throughout history.
Exactly right. Well, I thank you for your time, and I thank you for allowing me to interview you. And with our interruption with the internet, you've hung in there, and you've been so gracious to me with this. And I've been so honored to hear your story. And I know the other people that view this will enjoy your story as well.
Well, Kathy, as I run across more pictures, I'll think to send them to you just so you'll have them.
I
Picture of when I was, let's see, in the 10th grade, and I went out for a football team. It turned out to be they needed more players, and I managed to get on the team. Turned out to be a Catholic high school team. I was the first Jewish, the only Jewish player on a Catholic high school football.
How did that feel? Did they pick on you, or did they just accept you and take
Oh
you?
no, no, I heard. I was used to playing sandlot. We couldn't afford uniforms, but we played tag football in a playground, and that was my first experience. And then I heard through the grapevine that there was a team, a high school team, that didn't have enough players because it was a small high school. So they were looking for players. So I went out for the team and I made the team. I even remember the name of the team was the Commodores, and the coach was the fourth. He had graduated Notre Dame University, and he was the fourth string center on the Notre Dame football team.
Wow.
He became the coach of this Catholic high school team. He was a great guy. So I went out for the team. So I have a picture, 1938, when I was 14 years old,
Wow.
10th grade.
That is amazing. And you mentioned him before that he was from Notre Dame, and you're right, back in that time, that was such a huge university. It was so widely respected. It still is.
Yeah, so being fourth string on the team was still important.
Yes, yes. Absolutely. Oh, and you get to go to the Braves game tonight.
Yep.
But that's going to be fun, and we're going to go to one once it cools off, probably in the fall. But I thank you for your time, and I so have enjoyed interviewing you, and I hope that one day I'll be able to meet you in person when you come to one of the groups here close to Woodstock. It'd be nice to be able to see you in person.
By
Well,
the way, Woodstock, there's a restaurant there. It used to be called Semper Fi Restaurant.
yes.
They changed the name and moved the location. I don't know if you've ever eaten there.
Yes. I have friends that are Marines. The Semper Fi, you're right. It changed and it's called Rallies now, but I don't know where it moved to.
Yeah, they moved. Well, boy, it's in a shopping center because we ate there fairly recently. It's in a shopping center near Costco, I think.
Okay. I know where that's at.
I think that's where it is.
Okay. Yeah, then that's closer to exit 9 now. But well, thank you for your time, and I thank you for your service, and I hope that you have fun at the Braves game today.
Now, I don't have to worry about the heat because if it's outside seat, they have overhead fans. And if it's inside, it's air conditioned. So
you're covered either way.
I'm coming. That's in the Bank of America suite.
Nice. Good seats. Thank you. And I hope that you have a wonderful trip to the Atlanta Braves and enjoy your time at the baseball game.
Yeah, well, I'm waiting for Virginia Durr, with the executive with Delta Airlines, to come back. She told me she's coming back sometime in August to get another invite to go to the Delta suite because that is really an experience for that thing.
That's awesome. Enjoy it while you can. I mean, that's amazing to be able to see the baseball game, but also be able to see it in the suites.
Well, I got to waste another minute or so. I got about a week ago, I got a call from the new president of the World War II Roundtable. He said he got a contact from the Braves organization. They want him to send them the name and contact information of a World War II veteran to be honored for the hometown hero. And he said he thought of me first, so he just sent them my name. I made the mistake of saying, well, that's great, No problem. I always enjoy getting a free ticket to a Braves game. My twin brother and I were honored many years ago as hometown heroes at the old stadium. I shouldn't have told him that because he called me a couple of days ago and he said, well, he sent my name, but they checked their records and found out that I had already been previously honored.
Mm.
So they wanted a different veteran's name.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who they're going to honor.
Mm-hmm.
That had never received the honor before. Well, putting two and two together, I came to the conclusion the Braves didn't look at their records. They don't do that. They asked him for a name and contact information. I told him I was previously honored, so I think he decided to send the name and contact information of what, which is okay with me. I couldn't care less. Not that big a deal. Because the way they did it at the old stadium and the way they do it at the new stadium is a little different.
Right.
At the old stadium, they had us go out to the pitcher's mound, where everybody in the stadium could see us, plus showing it on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
The way they do it now is they have the veteran step 2 steps on the field where the people, the fans behind them can't possibly see them because they're just right close to the first row. They show their picture up on the big screen, but they don't have them go out really on the field where everybody can see them.
That's,
And not a big deal, but that's a difference. But anyhow,
that's too bad.
it is what it is.
It is what it is. Well,
Mhm.
I thank you for your time and I thank you for your service and all the wonderful stories that you've shared. You've had quite a career, quite a life, and you're still living it. I mean, you even retired when you were 93 years old. I mean, you just live life to the fullest. And I thank you for your service and your time. And I hope that you have a great afternoon and enjoy that Braves game.
Thank you for listening to all this stuff.
Oh, it's a pleasure and an honor to do so. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye. Have a great day.
Okay.